The Galactic Council gathered beneath the crystal dome of Valira Prime, its chamber filled with golden light and arrogance, alien voices echoing through the endless glass corridors, laughter rolling like thunder across the seats of power. The Terran envoy stood alone at the center of the hall, his black uniform simple, his face unreadable. Around him floated 1,000 representatives from 1,000 worlds, each one richer, older, and prouder than Earth. The Speaker of the Council, a tall figure with skin like polished obsidian, leaned forward, his voice smooth and sharp. The matter of the Terran dispute is concluded, he said. Earth will comply with the sanctions, effective immediately. His words dripped with mockery, and the chamber responded with quiet laughter. The envoy raised his eyes slowly, his calm gaze moving across the alien faces. You demand tribute for defense, he said softly. And yet it was our ships that bled beside yours during the Orion Wars. His tone carried no anger, only disappointment. And what did we gain? Your gratitude? Your trust? The speaker smirked. You gained survival, human. Be grateful you were allowed to rebuild after your little planet burned itself half dead. The words landed like a blade, a deliberate insult, and the hall erupted in laughter again. The envoy's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained calm. Humanity is not asking for permission to exist, he said. We are reminding you that we never needed it. The speaker waved his hand dismissively. Your kind is finished. Your fleets are obsolete. Your technology outdated. Even your courage is a myth you tell yourselves. You are a relic, a species of sentimental ghosts. The laughter returned, cold and cruel. The envoy's eyes lingered on the speaker for a moment, then on the shimmering flags of alien empires that surrounded him. Finally he turned away, his boots echoing softly against the polished floor as he walked toward the exit. His aide, a young officer with gray eyes, followed quickly behind. Sir, she whispered, should I respond to that? He shook his head slightly. No, they've already written their fate. She frowned. I don't understand. He paused before the great silver doors, his reflection splitting in the glass. They mistake silence for surrender. He said quietly, let them keep laughing. It will make the silence louder when it ends. Outside the council tower, the light of Valira's twin suns burned across the skyline. Ships drifted lazily through the upper atmosphere, banners of peace fluttering across the city's platforms. But beneath the calm surface, the Terran envoy's shuttle moved with purpose, its engines burning cold blue as it cut through the traffic lanes and vanished into the dark side of the planet. Within minutes it entered hyperspace, its signal scrambled, untraceable, inside. The envoy sat silently, his eyes closed, remembering the faces of those who laughed, remembering Earth's long humiliation, the sanctions, the forced disarmament, the centuries of being told humanity's age of war was over, that they were too emotional, too dangerous, too unpredictable to be trusted with power. They had listened. For a time, they had rebuilt in silence, pretending weakness while the rest of the galaxy forgot what kind of creature humanity really was. And now the galaxy's forgetfulness had ripened into insult. The shuttle reappeared hours later in orbit above a gray, silent world, Earth. Though no longer the Earth the galaxy remembered, the blue oceans were darker, the continents covered in vast metal grids, clouds streaked with the glint of orbital mirrors. A planet that had turned inward, waiting, hiding its strength. The envoy's ship entered the lower atmosphere, descending toward a deep scar in the Siberian tundra, where a hidden entrance opened like the mouth of an ancient beast. The shuttle disappeared inside, swallowed by lightless stone. The hangar doors closed, sealing the world above away, and for the first time in centuries, the underground heart of Earth stirred. The envoy stepped onto the cold steel floor, his footsteps echoing down long tunnels lined with frost. Soldiers in black armor saluted him silently as he passed, no insignias, no names, only the faint silver symbol on their shoulders. The Terran spiral, the mark of the old fleet. He entered the war chamber, a vast dome carved into the rock, its ceiling alive with holographic stars. At the center stood the command node, an ancient AI that had once coordinated Earth's last great defense. Its voice filled the air as soon as it recognized him. Welcome back, Director Hale, it said. The envoy's name finally spoken aloud, authorization code required. Hale placed his palm on the scanner, his voice calm, Iron Dawn. The AI hesitated, its tone shifting. That protocol has been sealed for 112 years. Confirm override. Hale looked up at the projected map of the Milky Way. Thousands of blinking markers representing the Council's empires. Confirm, he said. Across the globe, power grids hummed awake, ancient reactors roaring to life beneath forgotten cities. The ocean stirred as submerged hangars opened, revealing black metal hulls beneath the waves. The skies filled with faint streaks of light as orbital stations powered on. Systems that had been disguised as weather satellites now unfolding into kinetic defense platforms. In the darkness of Mars's shadow, shipyards hidden within the old canyons lit up, drones and machines emerging from hibernation, and far beyond Pluto's orbit, in the frozen quiet of space, something enormous began to move, a vessel so massive it blotted out starlight, its surface engraved with forgotten words, United Terran Command. Inside the command dome, Hale's aide watched the holographic readouts fill with data, her eyes wide. Sir, are we really doing this? The Council will see it as an act of war. Hale's voice was steady. It's not war if they started it a century ago. She hesitated. They'll never expect this. Hale looked at her, his gaze cold. They stopped expecting humanity a long time ago. He turned toward the console. Activate global communication blackout, reassign all orbital frequencies, and connect me to Lunar Command. Lunar Command, she repeated, almost whispering. That station hasn't transmitted since we told them to. Disappear, he finished, and they did exactly what we asked. Within seconds the screen flickered to life, showing an old officer's face, scarred and pale, his voice rough. Hale, he said. I thought we'd never hear that code again. Hale nodded. We held our silence as long as we could, but they laughed, and that laughter has a price. The man on the screen nodded grimly. Then it's time, Director. Hale's voice was soft but final. Begin Operation Iron Dawn. In orbit above Earth, the old Terran fleet came alive, thousands of ships that had slept beneath layers of dust and ice now rising like ghosts reborn. Their engines igniting one by one, blue light blooming across the void, from old frigates to colossal dreadnoughts. Their hulls still bearing the scars of the last galactic war, but their systems pulsed with new power, artificial intelligences linking them into a network that spanned light years. No speeches, no anthems, only quiet efficiency. And as the first fleet moved toward deep space, the moon's hidden installations opened, revealing long-range rail cannons capable of striking across systems. Targeting arrays online, came the report, awaiting coordinates. Hale's voice answered, don't fire yet, not until they notice the silence. Back on Valira Prime, the Council was celebrating their victory, their laughter echoing through banquet halls, holoscreens showing trade expansions and new defense treaties built upon Earth's submission. None of them knew their outer patrol fleets had already gone dark. The first sign came hours later when an outpost near the Terran border lost contact. Then another, then 5 more. The Speaker of the Council frowned. Probably human sabotage, he said. Send a task force to investigate. They sent 300 ships, each armed with the finest alien weapons, each commanded by veterans who thought war was still a game of pride. The fleet vanished within a day, no transmissions, no debris, only empty space. When reports reached the Council, panic began to ripple beneath the arrogance. It must be pirates, someone said, or a black hole. Another offered, not humans, they don't have that kind of power. But Sarin, the historian, whispered from the corner, they used to. His voice went unheard, drowned by fear. In the next cycle, the first human message arrived, not as a broadcast, but as an intrusion. Every Council terminal flickered and displayed the same line of text in Terran Standard. We tried silence, you chose laughter. The message vanished instantly, leaving systems offline for hours. And when they came back, every world near the Terran border was marked with an unfamiliar symbol, a silver spiral. Meanwhile, deep in the command halls of Earth, Hale watched the data scroll across the screens, lines of intercepted transmissions, the Council's fear unfolding exactly as planned. They'll send their main fleet soon, his aide said quietly, and when they do, he replied, we'll show them how humans make war. She hesitated. Sir, is this revenge? He shook his head. Revenge is emotional, this is calculation. He leaned closer to the display, his voice cold. They mocked our weakness, now. We'll teach them what strength looks like when it's controlled. As the hours passed, more Terran fleets left orbit, spreading like shadows through the dark, slipping between sensor nets, using old gravity wells and wormholes only human navigators remembered, every movement precise, silent, unstoppable. Hale stood on the bridge of the command carrier Retribution. watching as the stars stretched before them. "Status?" he asked. "All ships aligned, formation complete, weapons at standby," came the reply. And Council response. "Confusion, sir. They're still debating." He allowed himself a faint smile. "Perfect." At the same time, in the Council's war chamber, chaos reigned. Fleets scrambled without coordination. Senators shouting over one another, demanding explanations. One shouted, "They are bluffing. They have no power," another screamed. "Then where are our ships?" Holographic displays filled with empty coordinates. Missing fleets, dead signals. The speaker turned to the military minister. "Find them." "We can't," came the desperate reply. "Every relay has been jammed." Then the lights flickered, and for a moment, the chamber went black. When they came back on, the central display had changed. One massive image, Earth's symbol glowing in the center. Beneath it, a single transmission began to play, the voice of Director Hale, calm, emotionless, to the Galactic Council. He said, "You have mistaken mercy for fear, and silence for surrender. Humanity does not seek conquest, only correction. Your fleets will stand down, your weapons will power off, or we will remove them for you." Gasps filled the chamber. Outrage followed. "He dares threaten us?" Someone shouted, "He's mad." Another cried. The speaker trembled with fury. "Find his location. Strike him down." But before the order could even reach the comms, a new alarm rang through the room. One of the outer defense stations had gone dark. Then another, and another, each one vanishing in seconds. No explosions, no battles, just gone. And then the Council's main screen turned black, replaced by Hale's voice one final time. "Operation Iron Dawn has begun." The feed ended, leaving only silence. Back on Earth, the command dome glowed with blue light, the room alive with energy, all systems green. The technician reported, "Global strike capabilities at 100%, orbital assets synchronized." Hale stood at the center of it all, his hands clasped behind his back, his face illuminated by the holographic galaxies spinning above. "They will understand soon," he said quietly, "and when they do, they'll finally learn the difference between power and control." His aide looked at him. "Sir, what happens after?" He didn't answer for a long moment, then finally said, "After? We disappear again, and let them rebuild, until they forget once more." She frowned. "And when they forget again?" He looked up, his eyes cold and distant. "Then we remind them." As the first wave of human fleets vanished into the dark between stars, the laughter of the Council became a ghost, echoing faintly through empty corridors, replaced now by the quiet hum of fear spreading across worlds that had believed themselves invincible. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy felt small again, its empires fragile, its arrogance burned away by the shadow of a species that had once promised peace and learned the art of silence. Humanity had not returned to seek vengeance, only balance, and as their ships moved unseen through the endless night, a single message pulsed faintly across the void, repeated in every tongue, carried by every dying signal. They mocked humanity's weakness, and humanity remembered. The council chamber that once roared with laughter now vibrated with unease. The golden light that filled Valira Prime's crystal dome seemed colder, sharper. Cutting through the silence that had settled over the delegates like frost. Hours had passed since the first fleets vanished near Terran space, and still no reports had come back. Holoscreens flickered uselessly, their data feeds reduced to static. In the center of the chamber, the speaker's voice broke the quiet, strained and hollow. "We are not at war," he said, his tone unconvincing. "This is a communication error, nothing more." His words fell flat. No one believed him, not even himself. He repeated them again as if saying it enough times would make them true. But deep down they all knew something had gone very, very wrong. The arrogance that had once filled the air was gone, replaced by fear so thick it could be felt. Some of the younger delegates whispered nervously. Others clung to old excuses. It's a trap, maybe pirates, or perhaps an unstable wormhole. But none of those explanations fit, because there had been no distress calls, no wreckage, just absence, and in the void, absence meant something far worse than defeat. Sarin, the old historian who had once studied Earth when it still had a voice in the council, stood silently in the shadows of the chamber, his wrinkled hands clasped before him. He watched the panic spread like smoke, slow at first, then unstoppable. "You should have listened," he said quietly. The speaker turned to him, eyes flashing with irritation. "To what?" Saren's voice was calm but cold. To history, you mock what you don't understand, and you underestimate what you fear. The speaker scoffed. Fear? They're a minor world, an isolated species hiding behind outdated machines. Saren shook his head. That's what you said before they saved this galaxy from the Orion Purge. And again when they ended the Thalax Wars in 2 weeks. Every time you call them weak, they prove you wrong. But this time, you didn't just insult them, you provoked them. The room grew quieter with every word. Even those who had mocked Saren before were listening now. His tone wasn't angry. It was mournful, like a teacher watching a student destroy everything he tried to protect. One of the military advisors, a tall reptilian with silver scales, slammed his clawed hand on the table. Enough of this superstition. The Terrans don't have the capability to strike our fleets. They're bluffing, and I will prove it. The speaker nodded eagerly. Send reconnaissance, 50 ships, armed and cloaked. They will find the truth. Saren's eyes darkened. They will find it, yes, but you won't like what they find. No one listened. Commands were issued, orders sent, and the great fleets of the Council stirred once more, engines flaring to life in the high orbit above Valira. The sky filled with light as the ships aligned, banners of a dozen empires glittering like jewels, a show of strength meant to reassure the frightened masses. But beneath that pride was quiet desperation. No one wanted to admit that fear had already taken root. Hours later, the fleets vanished into hyperspace, their paths set toward Terran space. The journey would take minutes by Council standards. But on the other side, time stretched differently. In the cold void near the edge of Sol, the human defense grid was already awake. Satellites hidden in the blackness detected every distortion, every ripple in space, aboard the Terran flagship Retribution. Captain Rhea Dalton watched as her tactical map lit up with hundreds of incoming signals. Council ships, sir, her officer reported, 50 strong, closing fast. She didn't smile. She didn't even blink. No communication? She asked. None? They're coming in silent, Rhea nodded. Then let's show them silence. The fleet around her shimmered, massive ships fading into shadow, their hulls absorbing all light, their weapons unpowered, cold, invisible. The galaxy believed humanity's technology was ancient, outdated. But what they didn't know was that Earth had moved beyond energy. Warfare, beyond brute force. They fought with precision, with intelligence, with control. The Council fleets emerged from hyperspace near Pluto's orbit, their commanders arrogant and confident. No resistance detected, reported one. Primitive system, empty space. Another laughed. Perhaps their machines died of age. And then, without warning, their navigation arrays flickered, their communications froze, and one by one, every system began to fail. Panic erupted across the channels. We're losing control. Shields offline. Engines dead. Before they could respond, a voice crackled across every ship, calm, emotionless, unmistakably human. You were warned. It said. Then silence. Moments later, each of the 50 ships turned to light and vanished. No explosion, no debris. Just light swallowed by darkness. Back on Valira. The Council chamber shook as the reports came in. They're gone. An officer stammered. All of them. No survivors. That's impossible. The speaker shouted. We have never lost contact with an entire fleet. Saren's quiet voice broke through the chaos. You have now. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouting over one another. Accusations flying like sparks. This is an act of war. We must retaliate. They'll destroy us all. But beneath the noise was something deeper, the realization that for all their power, all their empires, the galaxy had no defense against what it couldn't see. The speaker turned to his generals. Prepare the Grand Armada, full strength. Sir, one of them whispered. We don't even know where to strike. Then strike everywhere. The speaker roared. Make them regret their defiance. But Saren shook his head slowly. They don't regret, speaker. They remember. And memory is sharper than your weapons. The speaker pointed at him furiously. Enough of your riddles, old man. We are the Council. We built this peace. We rule this galaxy. Saren's gaze was pitying. You ruled the noise, but the silence always belonged to them. Back on Earth, deep beneath the surface, Director Hale stood inside the war room, watching the flickering holograms of the destroyed fleets, his face illuminated by their fading light. His aide stepped forward. The Council will respond soon. She said, they'll come with everything. Hale nodded slightly. Then we'll take everything. His tone carried no emotion, only precision. "Do you think they'll ever understand what we're doing?" she asked quietly. "Understanding isn't necessary," he replied. "Fear will do." He turned toward the screen showing the Council's home systems, a dozen targets pulsing faintly. They laughed because they believed war was over, because they forgot that peace only exists when someone is willing to enforce it. His eyes narrowed. "We're not their enemy, we're their correction." Back in the Council chamber, reports poured in of entire regions going dark, unmanned stations erased, colonies silent, even trade routes collapsing as Terran interference spread through the communication networks. Ships scrambled in every direction, trying to restore order, but every command was intercepted, every signal hijacked, and on every screen appeared the same message, written in Terran standard: "This is not war, this is maintenance." The words echoed through the chamber, haunting and final. Delegates fell silent, even the speaker's defiance faltered. "What does it mean?" he whispered. Saren answered softly. "It means they're cleaning up what we broke." The panic outside grew into hysteria, worlds evacuating, citizens praying to gods they'd long abandoned. The galaxy had never faced an enemy that didn't boast, didn't threaten, didn't even explain. Humanity's silence was their greatest weapon. Because silence forced the galaxy to listen. For the first time in centuries, they listened. The speaker slumped into his chair, exhausted, the weight of his pride collapsing on his shoulders. "We should have never mocked them," he murmured. "We thought they were finished." Saren stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "No species that has buried its dead under the banner of unity is ever finished. You thought they were gone because you couldn't hear them. But Earth was never gone, it was waiting." The speaker looked up at him, eyes wide with something close to despair. "Waiting for what?" Saren replied, "For the moment when laughter would cost more than silence." Outside the chamber, the sky above Valira Prime darkened, the twin suns dimming as if shadowed by something massive. Alarms began to scream, officers rushed to the balcony, staring in disbelief. Far beyond the planet's orbit, space shimmered, and shapes began to emerge, not hundreds, but thousands, Terran ships moving in perfect formation, silent, black, like living shadows, their hulls reflecting no light, their engines invisible. They didn't open fire, they didn't broadcast messages, they simply surrounded the Council world. The speaker's knees weakened as he whispered, "They've come for us." But Saren only shook his head. "No, they've come to remind you who you laughed at." The world below fell silent, every transmission stopped, every ship in orbit shut down, as if the universe itself had gone still. And in that moment, every world across the galaxy knew what had happened, not from words, but from the absence of them. Humanity had moved again, swift and precise, not conquering, not claiming, just correcting, and in the cold heart of space, aboard the flagship Retribution, Captain Rhea watched as her tactical display blinked green, every system perfect, every objective complete, all targets contained, her officer reported. "No resistance detected." She nodded slowly. "Maintain silence." "We're not done yet." "Understood, Captain," came the reply, as the fleet drifted like shadows over the Council's proud world, their presence a warning carved into the stars. The galaxy had wanted proof that humanity was weak, and humanity gave them none, because weakness wasn't in silence. It was in the noise of those who never learned to listen, and now the Council listened, trembling beneath the quiet hum of Terran power, wondering if the humans would speak again, wondering if the next sound they heard would be their own destruction. But no sound came, only silence, deep and cold, the kind that carries the echo of judgment, the kind that reminded the galaxy that Earth had never been defeated, only waiting for the moment to rise again, the moment when the insult that echoed across the stars would finally be answered not with words, but with silence that could shatter empires. Beneath the quiet surface of Earth, the planet once dismissed as broken began to breathe again, deep under the ruined continents where the soil still carried the ashes of forgotten wars. Machines that had slept for a century stirred to life, one after another, their cores igniting. With blue light that rippled through the tunnels like veins of fire, the hum of reactors rolled across the underground world, slow and heavy, a heartbeat awakening after too long a silence. In the command vault beneath the Siberian ice, Director Hale stood in front of the main holo table, his face carved from calm stone, his eyes fixed on the data streams rising before him. His aide, Lieutenant Myra, approached quietly, her voice low. "The Council fleets have fallen back to defensive lines, sir." But their communications are collapsing. They're trying to re-establish order. Hale nodded once, his gaze never leaving the map. They will waste time arguing before they act. They always do. Myra hesitated. And us. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. We proceed. The Council's pride will keep them blind for another 24 hours. That's all the time we need. In the tunnels below, the sound of footsteps echoed as soldiers in black armor assembled in perfect formation. The insignia of the old Terran Defense Command glinting faintly on their chests. Their faces hidden behind matte helmets, emotionless, silent, above them. The ceiling trembled as massive lifts carried dormant war machines to the surface. Tanks older than the Council itself, rebuilt and reforged with new alloy, sleek and terrifying. Humanity's children returning to the light. In orbit. Thousands of satellites came online, their cloaked shells unfolding to reveal targeting arrays that had been hidden for generations. The network linked into one unified system. Earth's pulse synchronized again. For the first time since the Great Silence, the Terran network spoke in one voice. Hale turned toward the central AI core, its light flickering faintly like a dying star. The voice that emerged was neither male nor female, calm and absolute. Director, global readiness at 99%. Bring it to full, he replied. Activate the Valkyrie protocols. The AI hesitated for half a second. Those protocols were sealed by the old charter. Hale's gaze hardened, and I am unsealing them now. The air thrummed as the order took effect. Across the solar system, buried. Stations on Luna, Mars, and the asteroid belts came to life. Old satellites marked for decommission suddenly realigned their orbits. Beams of data and power connecting them into a single web. We built this cage to keep the galaxy out, Hale murmured. Now it keeps us in no longer. In the mountains of what had once been North America, colossal hangar doors opened with a thunderous crack, ice breaking, wind howling as something immense began to rise. The Eidolon, one of the last dreadnoughts of the Terran war fleet. Its black hull streaked with frost. Its engines glowing faintly like awakening eyes. It ascended slowly, pushing through clouds of snow and debris, emerging into the dark sky where the stars waited like witnesses. On its bridge, Captain Rhea Dalton stood with her crew, her hands clasped behind her back. System check complete, reported her officer. All decks stable, weapons on standby, awaiting fleet command authorization. Rhea's voice was quiet but resolute. Authorization confirmed. Captain Rhea Dalton, Eidolon, standing by. The AI of the ship hummed in acknowledgement. Welcome back, Captain. It has been a long time. She gave a faint smile. Too long, let's make it count. Far below, the Terran Council of Command, rebuilt in secret under Earth's core, came alive, a room filled with holographic projections of military leaders from across the colonies. Their faces stern, their voices calm. Operation Iron Dawn Phase 2 is ready, said Admiral Zane. Outer solar defenses synchronized, all long-range assets in position. Hale nodded. Begin deployment, quiet and clean, no declarations, no transmissions. And if the Council attacks again? Then we erase the term attack from their vocabulary, he said coldly. We gave them mercy once. They mistook it for permission. That mistake ends now. His hand moved over the command interface, each motion deliberate. They laughed, they forgot, and now they remember. In the black silence of deep space, humanity's fleet began to move, slow at first, then accelerating as the engines synchronized, invisible to scanners, invisible to light. 1,000 warships gliding through the void like the ghosts of an ancient army. Their hulls absorbing the starlight, leaving behind nothing but silence. They did not broadcast warnings or war songs. There were no speeches, no symbols, only efficiency. Above the Neptune perimeter, the fleet regrouped, their formation forming. The ancient spiral of Earth's first insignia. Rhea watched it unfold through the main viewport, her breath steady. Beautiful, isn't it? Said Voss beside her. His voice low, beautiful and terrifying, she replied. And that's the balance we live in. Back on Valira Prime, panic rippled through the Galactic Council as systems continued to fail. Entire communication sectors went offline. Their sensor arrays blinded by interference. They're jamming us, shouted the Minister of Defense. No, said Saren quietly. They're not jamming, they're erasing. The speaker turned sharply toward him. How could they? They have no access to our systems. Saren shook his head. They built half of your systems. You just changed the names. His words struck the room like thunder, but no one responded, because deep down they knew it was true. For centuries, Alien empires had used Terran designs, Terran code, and Terran logic to build their fleets, and now those same foundations were betraying them. The Council tried to issue emergency resets, but the commands returned locked, overridden by a single foreign identifier, Terra Primus. While chaos spread across the galaxy, Hale stood before the massive window of the command dome. Watching the holographic image of the human fleet spreading through the darkness, his aide approached again. "Director, your orders are complete, Phase 2 underway, and the Council." Still debating, still blind, he exhaled softly. "Then let's give them a wake-up call." He turned toward the console. "Send message." "To whom?" she asked. "To everyone." His voice was calm. "The time for whispers is over." She hesitated. "What should it say?" Hale looked into the void as the holographic Earth reflected in his eyes. "Tell them," he said. "The Terran silence has ended." Moments later, across the galaxy, every communication network flickered to life. Millions of holoscreens suddenly filled with static before resolving into the calm face of Director Hale. Behind him, the silhouette of Earth glowed faintly. "To the Galactic Council," he began, his tone steady. "You spoke of peace while you armed for war. You mocked our weakness while stealing our designs. You laughed at our silence and mistook it for surrender." He paused, his gaze unblinking. "But silence, like the void, is not empty. It is full of waiting." The entire galaxy watched, frozen. His voice carried through every ship, every world. "We do not come for conquest. We do not come for vengeance. We come for correction. You will stand down your fleets. You will withdraw from our borders. And you will remember your place among equals." The transmission ended, leaving only darkness. The Council erupted into chaos. "He threatens us," one shouted. "He declares war," another cried. But Saren's old voice rose above them all, trembling but firm. "No, he declares balance." The speaker slammed his staff down. "Send the Grand Armada, destroy them before they move further." But when the orders were given, no ships responded, no engines ignited, no weapons powered up. "They've locked us out," screamed an officer. "Our systems are offline." The speaker's voice broke. "Impossible." But across the stars, the impossible had already happened. Their fleets floated useless in the void, helpless before the storm they had summoned. On the bridge of the Eidolon, Rhea received the update. Council armadas disabled, total network paralysis confirmed. She nodded. "Begin counteraction sequence." Her officer asked quietly, "What should we call this one?" She looked through the viewport at the burning edge of a distant sun. "No name," she said. "We don't name routine work." He smiled faintly. "Yes, and the fleet began to move again, silent, efficient, unstoppable, erasing corruption and power in a single sweep. Down in the command dome, Hale stood motionless, watching the galaxy slowly reset itself under his control. "And so it begins," he said quietly, "the awakening of Earth." His aide looked at him, uncertain. "Will they ever forgive us?" she asked. He turned to her, his eyes calm but distant. "Forgiveness is for those who can afford innocence," he said. "We gave that up a long time ago." The hum of the reactors deepened. The lights dimmed slightly, as if the planet itself was exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. Humanity had awakened, not in rage, not in vengeance, but in precision and silence. The galaxy trembled before their return, because it wasn't war that had come for them. It was accountability, and the cold, steady rhythm of a species that never forgot, never forgave arrogance, and never mistook laughter for victory. Above the shattered edge of the galaxy's rim, the first Terran strike began not with thunder, but with silence that swallowed suns. Human fleets moved like shadows, invisible to sensors, their signatures erased from every form of detection known to the Council. Inside the bridge of the Eidolon, Captain Rhea Dalton stood still, her eyes on the shifting holographic map before her, red markers flickering like dying embers across the display. "Targets confirmed," said her tactical officer, Council. "Strongholds along the Veil corridor, 3 fleets, 7 defense platforms." Rhea's voice was steady. "No warnings, no transmissions, no second chances." A faint hum filled the ship as its engines powered up, blue light blooming across the hull. "Execute Operation Eclipse," she ordered softly, and with that, humanity began its quiet storm. The Council's armadas were vast, a tapestry of 100 alien races bound together by politics and greed. Their command ships floated above the worlds of the inner sectors, proud symbols of dominance, yet none of them saw it coming. The sky darkened as the stars around them blinked out one by one. Sensors screamed with false readings, gravimetric fields twisted like liquid, and then came the light, not from explosions, but from space itself tearing open. Human ships emerged in perfect silence. Their hulls matte black, engines cold, movement surgical. The alien commanders panicked, shouting orders, shields up, weapons ready, but nothing fired, because before a single command could complete, every system went dead. Across thousands of ships, the lights dimmed, power cores collapsed, communication vanished, and in that final second before darkness claimed them, the screens showed one image, a silver spiral burning against the black, the mark of Earth. Back in the command dome on Earth, Director Hale watched it unfold through the holographic network. Each strike displayed like a ripple through water. His aide Myra's voice trembled. "It's working, sir. Every fleet along the Veil corridor is gone." Hale nodded, his tone calm. "Don't call it gone, call it clean." She swallowed hard. "This isn't war," he said quietly, "it's calibration." On the other side of the galaxy, the Speaker of the Council stood on the balcony of the Prime Tower, his world's twin suns burning dim behind him. "They're targeting our power grids," shouted his minister. "They're not destroying them. They're rewriting them." Rewriting? The Speaker turned sharply. "That's impossible." But the truth unfolded on the screens. Systems that once bore the Council's crest now glowed with the Terran seal, factories reactivating, communication satellites reorienting towards Sol. Humanity wasn't conquering. They were reclaiming control over everything the galaxy had built using their stolen designs. The Council had laughed at human engineering, and now that same engineering had become their chains. On board the Eidolon, the silence of space was interrupted only by the hum of the engines. Rhea walked down the bridge, her steps slow, precise, her crew watching her with quiet respect. "Captain," said Voss, her first officer. "Council defenses neutralized. Their command stations are offline." She looked at him, her eyes unreadable, "And the civilian sectors?" "Untouched." "Good," she said softly. "We're not executioners, we're reminders." Her words carried through the bridge like a whisper of iron. Rhea had fought in wars before, seen planets burn, heard the screams of dying species. But this was different. There was no bloodlust, no hatred, only the cold necessity of action. She turned to the forward viewport, where the shattered remains of the Council's outer fleets drifted silently, their ships derelict, unpowered. "They'll call us monsters." Voss said quietly, "Let them," she replied. "They've called us worse, and they always come back when they need saving." Back on Valira Prime, the Council chamber burned with chaos, alarms screaming, delegates shouting, "Our fleets are gone. Entire sectors are dark. They are shutting down the relay gates." The Speaker slammed his hands on the table. "Enough. We will not panic." But his voice cracked. The room was filled with fear, the illusion of power crumbling like glass. Saren stood in the corner, his face pale but calm. "They warned you," he said softly. "They told you silence was mercy." The Speaker turned, his rage barely contained. "What do you want me to do, old man? Surrender?" "No," Saren replied. "Listen. For once in your life, just listen. Because the next sound you ignore will be your end." But the Speaker wasn't listening. No one ever did. Out in the void, near the Nebrix expanse, a Council colony world awoke to find its skies full of Terran warships, massive vessels hanging motionless above the atmosphere. The citizens panicked, governments begged for surrender, but no invasion came, no weapons fired. Instead, the Terran ships deployed thousands of probes that descended silently through the clouds, embedding themselves into infrastructure grids, cleansing corruption, resetting systems, shutting down black markets and illegal energy drains, and when the work was done, the ships left as silently as they came. On the planet's main broadcast tower, one message remained behind: "We are not your enemy. We are your consequence." In the Terran command dome, Myra watched the reports flood in, Council fleets erased, outposts restored, trade hubs neutralized, but her face carried no joy. "Sir," she said quietly, "some of these worlds, they weren't military." Hale didn't look up. "The infection spreads through civilians first," he said. "They built this empire on deceit and called it peace. We're not punishing them, we're teaching them." She hesitated. "Do you think they'll learn?" He finally turned toward her, his eyes sharp, cold, yet almost tired. "No," he said softly. "But their children might." At the edge of the Orion Arm, The Council's Grand Armada gathered, millions of ships forming a wall of light that stretched across space. The speaker himself had taken command, his voice echoing through the fleet channels. "We will strike them with everything we have. We will remind humanity that the galaxy belongs to the strong." His speech was broadcast to every world still loyal to the Council, but even as he spoke, his transmission began to distort, flicker, and vanish, replaced by another image. Earth, suspended in the black void, blue and calm. Hale's voice replaced the speaker's. "You had your chance," he said, "and you chose pride." Before the Council could react, the stars above their fleet shifted, and hundreds of human ships appeared, not through hyperspace, not through portals, but by bending the very light around them. The armada of the galaxy's strongest civilizations stood helpless as humanity's shadow fell over them. For one brief second, both sides stared into the abyss between them, and then, without warning, the Terran fleet moved. It wasn't a battle. It was a dismantling. Council dreadnoughts flickered out like candles in the wind. Their weapons turned useless, their engines dead, their shields burning away like paper. The galaxy's pride died in silence. Aboard the Eidolon, Rhea watched the destruction unfold, her voice low. "Cease fire," she said. "It's done." Her crew hesitated. "But Captain," I said. "It's done," she repeated. The human fleet halted. The stars quiet again. No wreckage, no victory cries, just the soft hum of power returning to stillness. Hours later, in the smoking ruins of the Council chamber, the speaker sat alone, his robes torn, his eyes hollow. The screens around him flickered with the last surviving transmissions. Images of Terran ships hovering above dead fleets. Unchallenged, untouchable, he whispered, "Why didn't they destroy us?" Saren's voice came from behind him, weak but steady. "Because destruction is easy, and they don't do easy, then what do they want?" The speaker asked, his voice trembling. "They want you to remember," Saren said, "and that is worse than death." In the Terran dome, Hale watched the final systems go offline. "The first strike is complete," said the AI. "No active hostiles detected." "Good," he said softly. "Let them feel the weight of silence." Myra looked at him. "Is it over?" He shook his head. "No, it's just beginning. They'll rebuild. They always do, and when they forget again, we'll remind them again." He turned toward the screen showing the peaceful glow of Earth, his expression unreadable. "This isn't revenge, Lieutenant, it's maintenance." Outside, the fleet of humanity drifted silently across the stars. No banners, no heroes, just the quiet guardians of balance. The same species the galaxy once mocked now standing as the unspoken law of the cosmos. The message clear in every heart that dared remember. When the galaxy called it war, humanity simply called it correction. Across the burning sky of Valira Prime, the capital of the Galactic Council lay wrapped in a silence more terrifying than war. No explosions, no ships, no thunder of battle, only quiet, thick and heavy, as if the entire galaxy had stopped breathing. The speaker stood at the window of the once proud chamber, his reflection ghostly against the pale light of dying suns. He watched as the remains of the Council's fleets drifted like ashes through the void, shattered hulls tumbling in orbit, flickering with the last sparks of energy before going dark forever. Behind him, the chamber that had once been filled with laughter was now filled with whispers. The delegates who had once mocked humanity now sat pale and trembling. Their pride ground into dust. The air carried the faint scent of ozone from dying power cores. The galaxy's rulers were reduced to frightened children clinging to the last illusion of control. "They've stopped," someone whispered. "The humans. They've stopped," another replied. "Why did they stop?" Saren's old voice broke the stillness, quiet but clear. "Because they've already said what they needed to say." The speaker turned to him, his voice trembling. "Said what?" "They've spoken nothing." Saren met his eyes. "Exactly." Far away, in the cold darkness beyond Neptune's orbit, the Terran fleets drifted silently, their formation perfect, engines dim, weapons powered down but still humming with potential. Inside the Eidolon, Captain Rhea stood at the bridge window, her face calm, her crew watching the holographic displays showing entire systems now quiet. No more resistance. No more signals from the Council's defenses. The galaxy had gone still. Status. She asked softly, "All fleets reporting complete containment." "Captain," her officer replied. "Outer colonies neutralized. Council command structure offline. No transmissions leaving the core sectors." Rhea nodded slowly, her voice a whisper. Then it's done. Voss, standing beside her, spoke carefully. Done? Yes, but at what cost? She turned toward him, her eyes distant. At the cost of memory, she said. They will remember this silence longer than any war. She looked down at her hands, the faint reflection of starlight on her skin. When they mocked us, they called us emotional creatures, too fragile for control. But this isn't emotion. This is precision, and that's what frightens them most. On Valira, panic began to take a new form, not the chaos of destruction, but the dread of realization. The Council's worlds were still intact, their cities still stood, their people still lived, but everything that made them powerful was gone, their fleets useless, their weapons frozen, their systems rewritten by Terran code. They could not attack, they could not flee, they could only wait. The speaker collapsed into his chair, head in his hands. We should have never mocked them, he whispered. We thought their silence was weakness. Saren approached him slowly, placing a trembling hand on his shoulder. You thought wrong, he said, his tone heavy with sorrow. Silence is what humans mastered when the rest of us still screamed for attention. The speaker's voice cracked. Then what do we do now? Saren looked toward the stars visible through the cracked dome. You do what they taught you to do, he said. You rebuild, and you remember. In the command dome on Earth, Director Hale watched the holographic galaxy spin slowly before him, the silver spiral marking every Terran-controlled region. His aide Myra stood beside him, her voice quiet. The Council has surrendered, sir. No military response detected anywhere. Surrender is irrelevant, Hale replied. They'll tell themselves it was mercy, that we spared them. They won't understand that this wasn't about mercy. He paused, looking at the image of Valira glowing faintly on the display. It was about balance. Myra frowned. You think they'll ever see it that way? Hale's expression didn't change. No, he said, because they're still trying to understand us as they understand themselves. And that's their greatest mistake. They think we fight for revenge. But we don't, we fight for memory. On the Council's homeworld, chaos turned to despair. Citizens filled the streets, watching the skies for Terran ships that never came. No bombs fell, no orders were issued. The humans simply vanished into the dark again, leaving behind the shadow of their power. The speaker tried to speak to the crowd, his voice breaking through trembling lips. They won't return, he said. They've made their point. But the people didn't believe him, because above the horizon, faintly visible even in daylight, was the ghostly outline of the Terran fleet, motionless in the upper atmosphere. Silent watchers, their presence like a reminder carved into the heavens. And the people whispered prayers to them, not as gods, but as warnings. Don't anger the quiet ones, they said, don't wake the Earth. Meanwhile, in orbit above Titan, Rhea stood before the fleet projection. Her officers gathered around. Council sectors stabilized, reported one. Civilian transmissions normalized. She nodded, maintained surveillance, but no contact. Should we issue demands? Asked another. She turned to him, her expression hard but calm. We don't demand, we don't negotiate, and we don't explain. We've already shown them everything they need to know. She looked out the viewport, the stars glinting coldly against the hull of the Eidolon. When I was a child, my father told me Earth was finished, she said softly. He said we would live as servants to the galaxy forever. But he was wrong. We didn't serve, we waited. Her words hung in the air like gravity, heavy and unbreakable. Back in the ruins of the council chamber, Saren sat alone by the broken window, the speaker gone, the delegates scattered, his old hands shaking as he opened an ancient datapad. It flickered to life, showing an image of Earth centuries ago, green and blue and beautiful. He whispered, "You never stopped watching, did you?" His voice trembled with something close to reverence. They called you savages, and you showed them civilization. They called you weak, and you showed them restraint. They called you extinct, and you showed them eternity. He closed his eyes, the faint hum of Terran systems still echoing through the air like a heartbeat beneath the planet's crust. Maybe now they'll understand, he said softly, that humanity's silence was never surrender. It was the sound of something greater preparing to speak. At that same moment, in the quiet void near the Andromeda Gate, the Terran fleet regrouped, thousands of ships aligning in perfect order, their formation forming the ancient spiral symbol of Earth. Hale's voice transmitted across the network, reaching every captain, every soldier. "We do not celebrate," he said, "because this is not victory, this is correction, and correction never ends." Today we reminded the galaxy what happens when arrogance mocks discipline. Tomorrow we disappear again. Because true power is not in showing force, it's in choosing when not to use it. Across the fleet, his words resonated like truth written into steel. Humanity's warriors stood at their posts, silent, proud, eternal. On Valira, the dawn rose again, the sky still haunted by the faint silhouette of the Terran ships. Saren looked up one last time, the wind whispering through the ruins of the Great Hall. They will come again, he said quietly, not to destroy, but to remind. And somewhere far above, aboard the Eidolon, Rhea whispered into the quiet of her command bridge. We never wanted to rule them, she said, we only wanted them to learn. The ship drifted toward the black horizon of space, its engines flaring softly, carrying with it the weight of a species that had borne every scar, every betrayal, and turned them into purpose, because humanity had not won. They had endured, and endurance is the greatest power of all. And so, the galaxy rebuilt itself in the shadow of Earth, every world whispering the same story in fear and awe, the story of a species that never forgot, that never forgave arrogance, that turned silence into strength, and when they looked to the stars and saw nothing, they prayed it would stay that way, for they knew that somewhere in the dark, Earth still watched. Still waited, not with anger, but with quiet vigilance, because when the galaxy called it overkill, humanity simply called it another day's work. The galaxy drifted through a fragile calm, the kind that follows a storm too vast for words. Worlds once proud now whispered beneath broken skies, and the memory of humanity's return hung over them like a ghost. The Council's banners were gone, its fleets scattered, its arrogance reduced to ruins that floated quietly in orbit. No songs of victory echoed, no cries of vengeance remained, only the echo of what they had done to themselves. On Valira Prime, Saren walked through the deserted halls of the Council chamber. The marble floors cracked, the once golden domes blackened by the fires of panic and power loss. His old hands brushed against the wall where the words unity and peace were engraved, now faintly glowing with Terran code, a message the humans left behind not to taunt but to remind. Above him the faint hum of orbital Terran satellites still resonated like a heartbeat, soft but constant. Watching, never sleeping, he whispered to himself. They didn't destroy us because they hated us, they saved us because they couldn't trust us. He remembered the envoy years ago, the human who had stood in this very room, mocked, dismissed, humiliated before 1,000 witnesses, and yet who had walked out with eyes full of calm fire. They mistake silence for surrender. That was what he had said, and now Saren finally understood the meaning. Silence had never been humanity's weakness, it had been their patience. The patience of a predator that waited until arrogance exposed the throat of its prey. The galaxy had believed humanity extinct in spirit, but that spirit had been steel, forged in centuries of survival, pain, and exile, and when it returned, it came not with rage but with precision so absolute that no one could even call it cruelty. On Earth, beneath the surface where the Terran command dome still pulsed with soft light, Director Hale stood before the central hologram, the galaxy spinning slowly above him, every system glowing faintly where Terran hands had touched. His aide Myra entered quietly. It's done, she said softly. The council has dissolved. Their leaders have surrendered to their own fear. Hale's voice was calm, steady. Fear is temporary, memory fades. But guilt lasts generations. He turned his gaze toward the holographic Earth. We don't rule them, we remind them. Myra frowned slightly. Sir, the fleet is asking for new orders. Do we stand down? Hale was silent for a long moment, the light flickering across his expressionless face. No, he said finally, we stand watch. High above, aboard the Eidolon, Captain Rhea Dalton looked out the viewport as her ship drifted silently over a dead sector where the last council fleet had fallen. Her crew spoke in hushed tones, the hum of the engines the only sound in the air. They'll never forgive us. Voss said softly beside her, his eyes fixed on the distant stars. Forgiveness is for equals, she replied. They're not ready for that yet. He turned to her. Do you think they ever will be? Rhea's gaze hardened slightly, maybe in a few centuries, when they forget how fear feels. She looked down at the console, her reflection faint in the dark glass. Until then, we keep them afraid, not because we want to, but because they need to. Her words carried no pride, no victory, only exhaustion, the weight of duty heavier than war. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds, life began again, slowly, carefully, under the shadow of the silence humanity had left behind. Children were taught stories of the Terrans, not as monsters or heroes but as warnings. They are the ones who remember, parents said, and they only return when we forget. In temples, priests whispered prayers to unseen watchers, keep them sleeping, they said, let them rest. In the marketplaces, traders refused to sell relics of old wars, afraid even to speak Earth's name aloud, yet no matter how hard they tried to bury the memory, it remained, carved into the systems, encoded in every machine, in every strand of their technology, the mark of Terran design, the ghost in every circuit, the reminder that the galaxy was still borrowing the tools of those it once mocked. In the command dome, Myra looked at Hale, her voice quiet, uncertain. Sir, do you think they'll rebuild stronger? Yes, he said, they'll rebuild stronger, wiser, and quieter. And when they do, she asked, we'll let them believe they're free, he replied. Because the illusion of freedom breeds peace longer than fear ever could. He paused, then added. But when arrogance returns, when laughter replaces caution, we'll be there, as we've always been. His tone carried both pride and sorrow. They call us the monsters of history, but history is written by the ones who survive it. On Valira, Saren recorded his final message, sitting by the shattered window of what was once the Council's grand hall, his voice soft, the stars reflecting in his eyes. This is Saren of Valira, last historian of the Galactic Council, he said. To whoever listens, remember this, Earth did not conquer us, it corrected us. They gave us the peace we claimed to want but were too arrogant to earn. He paused, his breath trembling. They didn't take our worlds, they took our pride, and left us our lives, because they understood that humiliation lasts longer than destruction. His gaze drifted upward to where the faint light of Terran satellites still shimmered like watchful eyes. And maybe that's their kindness, to let us live knowing what we've become. On the Eidolon, Rhea walked alone through the observation deck. The stars stretched before her like an endless ocean. She spoke softly to no one, maybe to herself, maybe to the ghosts of the past. We could have ruled them, she said. But ruling breeds rebellion, and rebellion breeds war. She closed her eyes. Better they fear us than hate us, because fear fades into discipline, and hate never does. She looked down at her gloved hands, trembling slightly. We gave them a gift they'll never thank us for, peace bought with silence. She turned away from the stars, her expression hard again. That's humanity's curse and its strength. We don't destroy because we enjoy it. We destroy because no one else will do what must be done. Back on Earth, beneath the endless circuits of steel and stone, the command dome slowly dimmed, its lights fading into a soft glow. Hale placed his hand on the console, whispering, sleep now. The Ari's voice responded quietly. Will they be safe, Director? For now, he said, until they forget. He walked toward the exit, the sound of his boots echoing against the floor, fading into silence. Outside, the wind swept over the metal plains of a reborn Earth, carrying with it the faint hum of engines hidden far below, a lullaby for a planet that had learned to stay quiet. Centuries would pass, civilizations would rise again, and the story would twist in the telling. The Council would become myth, and humanity's vengeance would turn to legend. Some would say the Terrans vanished into another galaxy, others that they became the very fabric of the stars. But those who studied deeply, those who listened to the silence between transmissions, would find traces of them still, faint, deliberate. The sound of distant systems adjusting themselves when no one gave the command, the whisper of an unseen hand maintaining balance. And they would know, humanity never left. It simply watched, it waited, it remembered. And somewhere in that infinite dark, aboard a ship that never stopped moving, Rhea Dalton stood on the bridge of the Eidolon, the galaxy reflected in her eyes. They'll laugh again someday, she said quietly. They always do. Voss looked at her. And when they do? She smiled faintly, almost sadly. We'll answer, the same way we always have, with silence. She turned to the stars, whispering. The galaxy calls it overkill, but we just call it another day. And as the engines roared softly and the ship vanished into hyperspace, the stars around her flickered one last time, like the heartbeat of a species that had conquered not the galaxy, but itself. The galaxy slept again. But it was not the peaceful rest of victory. It was the silence that comes when everything that was certain has been broken, and those who survived are afraid to breathe too loudly. The stars themselves seemed dimmer. As if they too feared to disturb the quiet left behind by Earth's hand, on Valira Prime, the proud capital of the Galactic Council, the cities had begun to rebuild, the streets filled once more with light, but the laughter that had once echoed through its crystal towers never returned. Every world, every empire, every species that had mocked humanity now lived beneath a single truth. They were still being watched. The council chamber was now a museum of failure, its broken seats left untouched, its shattered dome left unrepaired as a reminder. The few who remained came not to rule, but to remember. Among them was Sarin, old and frail, the last historian of the age before silence. He stood before the cracked emblem of the council and whispered. We were so certain they were finished, so certain we had outgrown them, but humanity doesn't vanish, it waits. Far beyond the core worlds, in the black space between galaxies, the Terran fleet drifted in perfect stillness, 1,000,000 tons of iron and memory moving as one heartbeat. Aboard the Eidolon, Captain Rhea Dalton sat in her chair, the soft blue light of the control panels reflecting in her eyes. The hum of the engines was gentle, like breathing. All systems stable, said Voss quietly. Fleet in position, awaiting your word. Rhea nodded slowly. No word today, Commander, she said. We've said enough. He hesitated. You think they'll keep the peace? They always do, she replied, for a few generations. Then they forget again. They build empires. They call themselves gods, and they start to laugh. She looked out into the void. And then we remind them why the stars go silent when they do. Back on Earth, deep beneath the surface, Director Hale stood in the war room that had gone dark again. Its walls humming with residual power. Its great machines sleeping like beasts after the hunt. He placed a hand on the console and whispered, Sleep now. The Ari's voice responded softly, Are they safe, Director? For now, he said. But safety breeds arrogance, arrogance breeds noise, and noise always brings us back. He turned off the main lights, leaving only the faint glow of Earth's holographic outline. We were never conquerors, he said. We were custodians of a galaxy that forgot how to behave. Centuries passed like hours in the void. The council reformed under new names, new faces, and new arrogance. Their children told stories of the Dark Age when humans ruled through silence. Some believed it myth, others whispered it as prayer. Don't wake the Terrans. They would say before war councils, let them sleep. And yet greed never sleeps long. One by one, systems began to test the silence. Fleets expanded. Colonies pushed into forbidden sectors. They spoke in confidence. The humans are gone, they said. Their power was a trick of technology, a myth made by fear. But in the dark between stars, where sensors failed and signals died, ships began to vanish again. Not in battles, not in fire, just gone. And those who survived told stories of seeing shadows moving between the suns, of voices whispering in their comms, soft and human. We told you not to forget. On the Eidolon, the fleet came alive once more, its systems waking without command, its crew, descendants of the first Terran warriors, moving with quiet purpose. Rhea Dalton's name long gone but her spirit carried in the new captain's orders. We move for correction, she said, her voice as calm as the void. No revenge, no speeches, just correction. The fleet turned toward the stars where old arrogance had taken root again. Black hulls gleaming faintly, engines whispering into motion. They crossed the darkness in silence, their formation perfect, unstoppable, inevitable. Back on Valira, an old man teaching his students about the age of humanity paused as the ground trembled faintly, lights flickering in the sky. One child raised a hand. Teacher, she asked, what happens if the Terrans come back? The old man smiled sadly. They never left, he said. They're just waiting for us to make the same mistake twice. Outside, the horizon dimmed as something vast passed across the stars, too high to see clearly, too silent to track, and the old man closed his eyes. Whispering, we laughed once, and they answered, and we never stopped paying for that laughter. The Terran fleet spread across the galaxy again, not as conquerors but as surgeons cutting away the rot. Systems that had enslaved, empires that had lied, all fell quietly, their networks rewritten, their fleets disarmed. No one knew where the strikes came from, only that when the lights returned, the Terran spiral glowed faintly on their consoles, and everything worked again. Better, cleaner, more efficient. Humanity didn't demand submission. They simply restored order. The galaxy began to whisper once more, not in laughter but in fear. They've returned. Some said, the silent ones, others called them the keepers. But every world knew the truth. They were the humans, and they had come again to fix what pride had broken. Back on Earth, in the quiet chamber beneath the mountains, the Ari's voice stirred as power flowed once more, Director Hale. It said softly, though centuries had passed since his death, Operation Iron Dawn, reactivated. In that moment, somewhere far in the void, a single voice answered through the ages, Rhea Dalton's final recording, her words timeless, steady, human. They'll call it overkill, they always do, she said, but to us, it's just another day's work. The message played again and again, carried through Terran frequencies, repeating across every corner of the galaxy as the silent fleet resumed its watch. In the Council's new capital, young rulers met beneath a glass dome that once again looked out over the stars, confident and blind. One of them laughed at a report of vanished ships, old myths. He said, ghost stories for children. But as he spoke, the lights flickered, and every console in the room froze, the laughter died, and across the floor appeared a single message, ancient, written in Terran standard, do not test the silence. Outside, the night sky darkened as a shadow passed over their world, vast, patient, eternal. And so the legend of humanity became the law of the galaxy, unseen yet everywhere, feared yet never hated, because deep down, every species knew that the humans were not monsters. They were the balance, the boundary between chaos and extinction. They came when laughter returned, when arrogance rose, and when peace became a mask for decay. They were the ones who reminded creation that order had a price, and that silence was not weakness but warning. In the eternal dark, where their ships drifted, like living constellations, a voice spoke softly into the void, echoing across time and space. We are humanity, the custodians of consequence. And the stars trembled in quiet reverence, because when the galaxy called it overkill, humanity simply called it a normal day.